I would notice how my body was reacting. I'm uncomfortable. I'm feeling sweaty. I'm, trying to plan for what the other person is going to say so that I can react in hopefully a calm way. And I remember him saying to embrace the uncomfortable because it shows that you care. And that I bring myself back to because...
Welcome to the Unconventional Leadership Podcast, where we help you unlock your potential as a leader. Thank you, everyone, for joining this week's episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. I have the distinct pleasure today to be with the Chief People Officer of Ronald McDonald House of Greater Cincinnati, Melissa Stier. Melissa, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Well, I am always energized by the energy and the leadership and I feel a distinct power when I'm with you. So thank you for joining the journey of leadership with Talent Magnet Institute. And today we're going to talk about a variety of things, from living out our values and motivating others and being in a direct environment of purpose. And how do you find that personally, and how do you amplify that in the workplace? So it's just, you're going to be along for a great journey today. That's for sure. So
excited.
So Melissa, what are you finding as it relates to the teams, and you may even be doing this in your own work environment, teams that are performing really well right now and teams that feel a tad bit rudderless? What do you feel like are trends to that, are contributions to that? And what can we do to lead well in today's work world?
Yeah. So when I think about successful teams, I think about the components that make up those successful teams. But then there's also the outliers, these outside factors that come into play. And for us, when I think about the teams that might be having some struggles, it's taking a step back. Is it leadership? Is it things that are out of our control, maybe from the recruiting standpoint? We may have positions that are open that are causing just some major stressors because we're understaffed. So taking a step back and looking at what's causing the gaps that we're seeing within the functions of our team overall. And one of the things that I see is compassion fatigue can be very real in our industry.
Yeah.
And a lot of times you're seeing those things. It could be outside factors coming in that maybe people are pushing off because they don't want to bring that to work. There's already enough going on that they don't want to disrupt the things that are working well. But also it's the very real things that we deal with at the Ronald McDonald House. And while things can be really good and fun, there's just the emotional weight that can be coming into the job overall, whether that's from outside or from inside.
Do you have to think about early coaching? How do you onboard someone into that environment who may not have been in that environment before? Is that a formal program and onboarding experience?
Yeah, so we're very hands-on from the beginning. So even in the interview process, it doesn't have to be a forward-facing guest position, but it might be just trying to understand what other teams are going through. So we remind them that this is a very joyful place to work, but there are pieces of it that can be very daunting. And again, whether it's guest services, that's going to be more frontline dealing with our families, as is our culinary team, as is our housekeeping team.
Yeah.
So we do trauma-informed care training. We have a specialist that, that does that for us. And we start that from the very beginning with our new hire orientation.
Excellent. So one of I think some of the most fun volunteer activities I've done over the last 4 or 5 years have been at your place, bringing teams to build lunches. Even recently, we built out some fruit cups.
Yeah.
Such a great hands-on experience, but also amazing interactions with humans. I got emotional just today talking to our production team at Cincinnati Podcast Studio about just the real and the joy of children who you all make feel comfortable and normalize as much as you can. I don't know the exact phrase you would use for it, but you get to interact with amazing children who have things going on that are in some cases maybe unbelievable to you personally if you've not experienced it. In other cases, you're like, I'm so glad there's a place that helps these families navigate through things. So whether it's helping fill up your toy closet or volunteering, these are things I encourage all of you to think about. Like, what could you do? You could call Ronald McDonald House and book a volunteer day or a volunteer afternoon or morning or what have you. And I encourage all of you to do that, whether it's with Ronald McDonald House or someone else, because the team gets fulfilled from it and you get to bring joy into the lives of others, right? But how do you prep people for what they may experience? And how do you encourage all of us to interact with individuals that may be going through something that they can't quite understand or fathom in their own life?
So when a group comes in, say, to do one of our Taste of Hope meals, they get a 5-minute video that shows them a little bit about our house, but also what to expect when you're there. We have things that we would encourage them to say to our families when they're interacting, but also those to think about not to say to our families. And so whether it's somebody coming in to volunteer or a new employee starting, it's going through this training of how to understand the environment that you're in. Like, one of the things that I remember from our training is to not say good morning, because it may not be a good morning for them. And that could be triggering for a family member. Do I mess up and say it? Yes, I do. And then I'm triggered to remember, I shouldn't have said that. But it's not that you have to tiptoe around our families.
Sure.
But it's important to recognize what we're saying. Is it helpful, or could it be hurtful to them in their vulnerable state that they're in? So making sure that people that are coming in from the community to serve in our house, that they feel comfortable, that they can talk to the families, because that's the best part, is engaging with our families.
Absolutely.
So when you think about the joy that we're trying to bring to the day-to-day and a not so joyful time for them, what does that look like? How are we showing up for our families?
And I would assume in some cases, if they're getting a level of care that Cincinnati Children's provides, it's the top in the world.
Right.
Right. So there is a part of thankfulness. You feel like they are blessed and thankful to be there.
Right.
Because they're getting care for whatever they're navigating. I'm even talking through this, like this plays out in our everyday lives, right? So interacting with friends and other families and colleagues, whether you're at a sporting event or an activity, whether you're in the workplace. We never know what's coming through the door with someone from the emotion that they're experiencing, things they're navigating. And as employers and teams and leaders, we have to be thoughtful about that. So some of these are just good coaching skills for us all.
Absolutely.
Right? To think about how we ask what we ask every day to the teams that we're interacting with.
One of the things that we learned in the training was it's not what's wrong with you, it's what's happened to you. So when you think about the trauma response somebody might have that might be a trigger, you're right. It shows up every day. It's in your general interactions. It's at the grocery. It's everywhere. And it really teaches you, how do you show up for a stranger every day?
Yeah.
So yes, bringing that into the workplace, it's definitely a usable skill.
Yeah. What have you, are there certain things that you've learned over your career? Or what are those certain things that you've learned over your career to really click to a couple next levels? So what we say often is unlocking human potential. What are some real things that either has been done for you, with you, or that you've learned to do with others that help unlocks the potential of a team, unlocks the potential of employees who work directly with you or in your organization?
The first thing that comes to mind is to listen. I am a big talker and I love to talk, and really making sure that as I'm engaging with someone, allowing that space to listen and to be okay in the quiet too. I struggle with that, and that's something that I really have to remind myself to make sure that I am allowing that time for silence, because a lot of times that's where the unlocking can happen. Also, I think when you look at trust, I think that's something that is so critical. And I don't see any way to build trust except build that relationship. And that takes time. You can't just go in and bring somebody new on your team or join a team and think that that trust is just already going to be there. I always say that I trust until somebody's given me a reason not to. But when I'm trying to build that rapport with somebody else, it's very critical that we allow that space, that we build that relationship and truly engage with individuals to build that trust so that they can see it in action.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found, so I too tend to be an individual who openly trusts until otherwise learned the adverse could be true or should be true in certain scenarios, but not everyone's like that.
Right.
Some people, there is like this, hey, I've worked for a leader in your role before, and here's, things that we deal with, and here's how they leveraged coaching. Here's why they use 360s the way they use that may not be for the same reason how you or I would use them, which is actually to invest in them and help them grow and develop, right? What have you learned to do in those scenarios where you can tell this team member needs a little bit of a different approach because I can tell she or he just doesn't naturally trust me or trust the team that they're on?
Everybody's different. So it's really trying to get to know them as a person, asking them questions. How do they like to receive feedback? Asking them how they want to be coached best as well. I do have an employee that had at one point on my team told me, he had never, it made him uncomfortable thinking about having this very trusting relationship because at what point am I going to turn on him? What point is that switch just going to flip? And that it takes time, and understanding and having those conversations, making sure we're not glossing over it.
Yeah.
We do monthly one-on-ones for our team throughout the organization. Some of those are monthly, some of them are weekly, some of them are biweekly. I think when somebody is new joining the team, or if somebody is expressing this distrust, the more that time that you can spend with them, I do think is better, so that you're trying to show I'm genuine in what I'm trying to do here. And I think the team overall, if they're not trusting the whole team overall, that's a very different scenario that, you're thinking, okay, I need to take a step back.
Correct.
What's going on here with the team?
Reevaluate that.
Correct.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you found in, how do I phrase this? Maybe even differently, could be a learning or maybe a comment that someone will share. But I want to ask, over the last 3 years, what major profound changes have you experienced in your leadership? At some point, the timeline, it's well, maybe I should have said 4 years, or, things have just radically changed. The world around us has shifted forever, right? The work world is different. The teams are different. What people are dealing with is just different. To a point, I was recently having a discussion with someone, and I shared, this person is to my elder, and I was I just don't know if you've ever, experienced something like has gone on the last 4 years in the workplace. It's been so dramatic, and every family unit and every human has a different response to what has happened and what's taken place. And now I'm trying to find new footing, right? What is the new foundation, and how do we operate here? And companies are still changing policies and approaches and things of this nature. What are the ones that have shifted that has stood out to you the most? What would you highlight? What would you say that you're also working extra hard on to learn about, to be able to bring a different response to?
I'll tell you what has been the hardest is I never fully understood how much of a counselor, a psychologist, an attorney, all these hats that we have to wear in HR. Through all of that, it through my leadership, I've really had to step up my confidence, my empathy. I think I've always been an empathetic person, but trying to balance empathy, but also what's best for the employee, what's best for the organization. We also have volunteers that we deal with. So when we look at our people, it's our guest families, it's our volunteers, it's our employees. So when I look at the mental well-being of people in general, I was not, obviously with COVID, we had no idea the impact that was going to have. And I feel like that is a very fine, defined line in this timeline of it's from COVID on. We talk about COVID. We talk about the impact that has had. With that, it has, I think, softened the conversation so much more to be able to say, how are you? But how are you? I mean, how many times did you hear, we can't be personal at work?
Oh, I know.
You know, you don't really want to build those relationships too close. There needs to be this line. And I've never wanted to operate that way. So I feel a sense of freedom that I can say, hey, how are you? What are you doing for fun? What are you doing to take care of yourself? I've had to have a conversation over the last week with an employee about that and trying to understand how we can be supportive, how we know when to bring in individuals to help. I'll tell you, that is another great piece of a partnership with Children's Hospital is, you know, we do have an EAP program with our own benefit program. But if I need some quick help, if we've had something major happen, I can call over to Children's, bring a grief counselor over, awesome. You know, and it's nice to know that we're not alone in that. But the mental well-being of people in general and making sure that they're okay, that we're doing these thoughtful check-ins, but I never dreamed it. You already have enough on the plates of HR professionals to deal with. And then you're bringing in the magnitude of, we want people to bring their whole self to work. Whatever's going on, we want to be able to take care of them. Yeah. How you show up is how you show up.
Right.
But not taking that home with me is the challenge. And so that compassion fatigue is real, even though I'm not directly working with our guest services team and the families. I'm working with a team overall that are dealing with their own stuff that they're going on.
Yeah.
Again, a lot of it from the hardships from what happened with COVID. We're still not long out of that.
Our mission of connecting businesses with the talent and resources necessary to help you achieve your vision and unlocking human potential are what Centennial and Talent Magnet Institute have been all about now for a collective 55 years. Centennial celebrates our 50th year, TMI is going into our 5th year, and we are ready to help you and your team get to the next level of strategy, vision, and achievement. Feel free to reach out and send us a note, and let's have a conversation. The learning for us all here is to, and this is just one of them, there's lots of learnings in all of this, but like whatever function you're in, even leaders in other functions are having unique experiences and changes that you may not recognize, right? So if you're in operations, you may not recognize the difficulty of being in finance today and what it is today versus what it was 4 years ago. If you're in finance, you may not recognize what it's like to be in operations today. If you're in any function partnering with human resources and your people operations and your talent development teams, things look different and there's different expectations now for the people leadership function from employees coming in that they have to respond to and have to have new approaches and things that we never, you know, whether it's right or wrong, we never had before. Some of the changes are really good, but other changes are like, well, I've never had to navigate that. And I don't even know, I mean, we talk about this often.
Right.
I don't even know where to go with this, right? It's one of the things that we always say that the CEO, president, executive director, and head of HR or head of people and talent are the most isolated roles in an organization. And I know that you know, any C function could say that, But there is a difference when you're leading people, behavior, emotion, transition, succession. In HR, you know more than a lot in the organization. And president, CEO of an organization knows more about what's fully going on. And then we carry that, right? So we've had lots of episodes. We had a episode with Joe Motes, and he talked about the backpack. And we just keep stuffing things in our backpack. And you could say a rucksack. I like the ruck. I like to throw weight on my back and go hike. And like you're just filling it up with weight of the world, of your own self. Where do we unpack that? So one of the things that one of the opportunities that Melissa and I we interact with quite often is in our CHRO mastermind program. We built that because we wanted a safe place, a community, a resource, a opportunity for leaders who may not have a place to go to ask questions and to build relationships and friendships differently, because we are all going through a lot of new. And wouldn't it be cool to be around 11 or 32 or 6 other people who they're navigating similar topics and maybe their approach? And so find yourself a safe place, find yourself an environment. I'm in one roundtable program for president CEOs, and I'm in a roundtable program for faith-focused entrepreneurs, right? And I'm in those groups because I need to be fed and I need other perspective for me to say something and someone say, you know what, Mike, I don't know if you're asking the right question. Yeah. Mm-hmm. You may want to be thinking about this. Just a couple weeks ago, I was in my CEO group and somebody asked me a question about how is your firm approaching this topic? And I was like, well, here's my response. Cause again, I'm a talker and I'm externally processing. And they're like, no, have you really thought about that? Because that's something, if I'm a customer, I'd be expecting from a firm like yours. And I was like, man, that's a great conversation. Where else would I have learned that?
Exactly.
So these different approaches, because you're right, it's so much new that we're all navigating. And it's kind of also a revolutionary time. Like we get the opportunity to build something fresh in a new approach, which is also, I don't know if you remember the very first couple of meetings that we had about the future that was coming with the CHRO Mastermind was like, let's dream about how we can reframe the future of people leadership, right? What could that look like as a group? What if we were like this rally cry of the future state of people leadership and future culture, and what can this look like? And so again, it's great to be in inspiring times. We get to think about the future.
It is. And I feel that in a time like that, we're more vulnerable. So that allows us to show our vulnerability. But also it allows us to be creative and not hold back, to think, okay, well, what if we did do this differently? So it's forced us to think about things differently. And I hope that we can carry some of that forward. Well, if we did it during this time, we can continue to do that. We can continue to reinvent and not be scared or hold ourselves back. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. So in the area of self-care, what have you found to be, and I'll go to if I need to be helpful? And what have you also found to be like areas that like, man, I wish I could figure out or overcome this personal challenge in the areas of self-care and well-being to get us to show up better in the workplace? What are you personally navigating? And
so I think for me, the work can feel overwhelming at times. And I try not to allow myself to get bogged down with that or to feel like I'm not doing something right or I'm not doing enough, because I can easily go down that rabbit hole of I'm not good enough, I'm not doing this enough. So by trying to take care of myself, which I do not have it all figured out. I do not.
None of us do.
That's right. Nobody does. They're lying if they say that they do. But one of my goals within the mastermind group was the exercise piece. I love exercising because it clears my head. I have all this noise up here going on all the time. Either I'm dreaming or I'm trying to figure something out or I'm just excited about something and I can't silence it. So I have all these things. My husband will tell you there's like a running list. I could have a whole list of all these things that I want to do. And then I overwhelm myself because I have all these things that I want to do because I'm just going to, change the world all in one page.
It's one of the
paper.
reasons why we connect so much.
I know.
I just got to tell you, because we're the same.
Yes. Yes. So I'm not short for ideas or coming up with things that I want to accomplish, but it's actually forcing myself to say, okay, what are the things that are important? So putting those goals in place, that mastermind group has been so great about that, thinking, okay, I'm always going to have work goals, but how am I taking care of me? And what does that look like? How do I show up as a better wife? How do I show up as a better mom? How do I show up as a better me? And I take it very seriously being in a leadership role. So the exercise piece, making sure that I'm committing to that. Because again, that allows me to dream big.
Yeah.
Podcasts, books, always learning. I had a boss. He was actually, when I did an internship, he was my boss at the time. He constantly gave me books. And he said, I always want you to have books on hand, either that you're reading or that you're ready to give to somebody else.
Oh, that's good.
Because that learning doesn't stop. So how am I feeding my body and my mind? Yeah. And I am notorious for I will start a book and then I'll put it down, but I try to make sure that I'm coming back to those books. The books, that you can have, the audio books are awesome because you can have that in your car. But how am I feeding myself? How am I replenishing? I have a very bad habit of when I get home from work, putting in my AirPods and playing a podcast while I'm making dinner. And I need to be careful of when I'm doing that because I'm coming home and I'm emotionally drained sometimes. Also, just talking all day long and interacting with people, it can be emotionally draining. And I'm trying to recharge by listening to a podcast, kind of rejuvenating. But I also don't want to alienate my loved ones at home. So I need to make sure I'm having a good balance with that. So I think everybody's different. You got to find what fills your cup. The other day, it was going for a walk in the sunshine. It was freezing cold, but if I can get outside in nature and just feel the sun, not even have any AirPods in, just listening around me and filling my cup that way, it's very rejuvenating.
Yeah. The uniqueness that I find with walking in the cold is it forces you to breathe deeper.
Yes. Oh, I was definitely breathing
really
deeper. Yes, because
unique.
that air just feels so
It just
crisp.
feels so, all right.
Yes.
So which then gives you oxygen, which then gives you energy, which then, there's all these things about being in nature.
Right.
Helps. I was talking to, so Melissa and I were together recently and we were talking about self-care journey and I was sharing about some of the journey that I've been on personally. And there was a story track that was playing in my mind at the time that I could not remember all the details of, so I did not specifically share them. But essentially, I have let's say a friend whose sister moved to a different country, New Zealand, Australia, one of those two. And in America, sorry to call it out, but this individual was on 8 medications.
Wow.
When she moved, she is now only on 1 medication that is deemed required for her health and well-being and her physical state. She was prescribed being outdoors X amount of minutes a week, yoga, and breathing is a part of her prescription. And after we got off our session, I reached out to this relationship to say, can you give me more? Like, I want to make sure when I reference this that I'm accurate, because this is what I heard you say, but I need to validate. You really said 8 to 1. And, the journey that I personally have been on has activity. Again, I've got tracks that tell me you've not gotten back on the bike in a while. So I'm just going to be really transparent and honest. you may be heavier now. And are you sure you want to get back on this bike now, or do you want to work out in other ways to do? And I love riding my Peloton.
Yep.
You haven't been on the treadmill in a while. These are all tracks I play. Like, do you really want to start that today? Or, again, in other ways, it could be like, I beat myself up a lot. I think there's a lot of us that are in the, no matter what type you are, there's areas where we beat ourselves up. And it may be because when we were growing up, people said things, or we felt things, or we watched things that so getting back on the bus, right? The one thing I love about the Peloton app is that it doesn't just cover weekly streaks. Like, I had to get over really quick not getting my blue dot, and I would go for 47 days straight. Yes. And I read an article that said, force yourself to skip a day. Lose your streak, because it's not all it's cracked up to be.
Yeah.
But I am in my 155th week at the time of this recording of a exercise streak, which is 1 week away, I think, from 3 years, 156 weeks. That doesn't mean that every day I've been on track. That doesn't mean that every day I've worked out to get to my 30 hours of exercise a month. It doesn't mean that every day I'm doing, or every even week. There's weeks where it's like, there's weeks, Melissa, that all I've done is meditate on the Peloton app. Mm-hmm. And that's okay.
Yes.
Right? So I share these things of what you were sharing, setting goals. I'm amazed how many executives and professionals have not thought about their personal goals in a while. Mm-hmm. And if there is something that we're doing at Talent Magnet Institute through Centennial, getting people, humans who are awesome in what they do, to think about their personal goals again, that feels like that's part of our mission of unlocking human potential, right? People who have said to me, I really haven't written down personal goals in 21 years, because for 21 years, I haven't been thinking about my own goals. I've been thinking about everybody else's, right? Or 6 years or 32 years. I mean, I've heard it all. But we need to think about personal goal setting. We need to think about the eulogy exercise. We need to think about what am I going to be celebrating 1 year from today? What am I going to be celebrating and excited about 3 years from today? Forget what you're going to be disappointed by. Let's just tuck that away. And it's okay if you don't hit every goal and every objective you have for yourself. But there's a reason why we put them in place. There's a reason why we verbalize them and say, I need to be exercising 30 hours a month. Whether that's whether that's a hike that takes 3.5 hours, or whether that's a 10-minute walk or run on a treadmill for 10 minutes, whether that's a 5-minute or a 30-minute meditation, or a 15 or a 120-minute Peloton ride, or just stretching.
Yes.
Just getting on the floor and actually stretching could be for 17 minutes, which is awesome. At least I did that today, right? But movement, my comment earlier about the friend who adjusted what she's doing to find better health, movement, being outside, breathing are really great places for us all to start.
Yes.
Right? We can just start there.
Yep.
And it can have transformational impact. So anyway, and I know we're both Peloton groupies, as I say. I'm really into it. It's been a great community. It's great trainings. It's great, instructors. It's great resources. Whatever you find, the Calm app or, the Noom app or, whatever exercise program on YouTube or whatever, just find something you feel connected to.
Yes.
Is our biggest encouragement.
Yes. And don't beat yourself up, as you said, missing a day. I was doing the same thing. When you're on a streak, you're thinking, oh, this is so great. And you feel like you have failed when you miss a day. Mm-hmm. And then you think, oh, well, it's going to be so hard to start back up if you've missed a week, if you've been out sick. I was battling a cold for about a month and a half, and I just did not have the lung capacity. So every time I'm thinking, well, I don't want to do it because then I can't do it to my full potential. No, stop beating yourself up.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't remember. There was definitely an article I read about this, but I may have also been on a bike hearing from one of the instructors that screw the streaks.
Yes.
Like blow up your streak
Yes.
and know that tomorrow's going to be okay.
Yes.
And there's like a life lesson in there, right? That like, it's going to be okay, but get back on the bike, the tread, the rower again.
Yep.
So at the end of the year, I was one row away from hitting my 50th row. So 12:31, like I'm knocking this row out, right? I hadn't been on the rower since like May because I tweaked my back a little bit. And I was concerned that it was from the rower, but yet I have friends who love rowing who say it's like the best, one of the best exercises. So I did click off the 50 of 50 box, got my badge, and been on it a few more times and was like, you know what? I'm back on. I'm back at it. We are back, baby. Like this is what we're doing. And it's similar to even this podcast, right? We took a little season off for very good intention, for intention that was intentional, of things we needed to focus on, of energy that we needed to place elsewhere. But it is great to be back, to jump back in and to have conversation. I've been amazed just in the short few episodes that have already went out. People are like, I am so glad you're back. And some people, by the way, don't even know we really took a break because they listen to it online anyway, right? Because podcasts are topical. I don't know how many times you may type self-care or mental well-being or leadership or career coaching in a podcast tool and you listen to an episode. You don't really care where that episode fits in their journey of 210 episodes. You just want the content. And that's another learning. Like it's okay not to be on a streak because you're still providing good to the world and the content you're providing. And it even rolls out of why we're here today. Yeah. So why we're having these conversations. We will be right back. We're going to take a moment to hear from our sponsors and partners.
So one of the hardest parts about podcasting is the moment you stop talking. I mean, think about it. The majority of the work that you probably put into creating a podcast is in the editing phase. So what if you didn't have to do the editing phase? Here at the Cincinnati Podcast Studio, we help you just come in and talk. We do all the rest. We have the cameras, we have the microphones, we have the lights, and then we have the editing tools to create the perfect content out of your podcast. Not only do you get the full podcast in video and audio, you also get short form content that you can use across all of your pages in social media. So if you want to learn more, go to CincinnatiPodcastStudio.com/tour to learn more and schedule your tour with us today.
So, Melissa, what are you most excited about in the coming months, in the coming year? What most excites you, whether it's personal or professional?
Well, personally, I have a senior that's going to be graduating high school.
All right. Major milestone.
It is. And, everyone has said you're going to be going through this wave of emotion. Some days it feels really good. Other days you're feeling really emotional. I think I've hit the point where I'm excited for him. I'm excited for what's next. He's ready. Sad for, what that does to the family, losing one child out to the world and not there every day, but it's exciting. But work-wise, I think it's, from the time we opened our expansion, we have been pretty much full every night with families. We have 177 rooms. So when we think about what's next for this organization, how do we continue to serve more families better? And that doesn't necessarily mean we have to grow our footprint, but what does that look like? So it's exciting to feel the energy that we're constantly caring for families, but also maybe reinventing what that looks like a little bit. As we talk about how things change in the world and that can change what we do as an organization, the steps that we take to care for our families. But it's fun to think about that. How are we taking care of our team? How do we continue to grow our team? We're getting ready to add social work to our organization. Okay. And that's been exciting. Our operations team has been working with children's to help identify what that looks like. But when I think about expanding the care that we can give to our families, that's a big investment that we're making to continue to care for them, because it's not even when they come to us, what they're dealing with, but that transition home. So being able to partner and think about what that looks like, that's really exciting too.
And is that, just share a little bit for those who are learning about Ronald McDonald House, possibly more than just, I make an occasional donation when I'm at a McDonald's, right? Like, how many Ronald McDonald Houses are there? Where does Greater Cincinnati's level up in terms of size and scope? And what are you doing here that's innovative? And what are you doing here that you're trying to learn from others to bring new innovations from the system? Is it national? Is it international? Just give us a
Global.
little bit of perspective there.
Yeah, so we are the second largest Ronald McDonald House in the world.
In the world.
Wow. So we have 177 rooms. When you look at the world landscape, there's over 270 chapters. So that would be, maybe they have a family room in the hospital to where it's just a place of respite.
Okay.
Maybe there's a house to where you can house more families. It could be maybe an 8-room house, or it could be a 200+ room house, like up in Columbus. We do call it the system. Our global office is out of Chicago, but every chapter operates as their own. They have their own leadership, their own board. So it's really an amazing system because everybody's working together. So it's not this, I'm going to come up with this idea and then I'm going to hold it as my own. We're going to share ideas between the system. It could be a small chapter. It could be a big chapter. So trying to share information because we're serving the same families. And you're going to have some families that unfortunately may be at one Ronald McDonald House and then end up going to another. So that's rare, but it can happen. Yeah. So we want the experience to be, when you think of risk management and the brand image, we want it to be a positive, safe experience, and why working together is so important. So, whether you're a family room to where you're just a place of respite that may have rooms in a hospital to a standalone, we see those as equal. We're serving the families. How do we do that better together? And that's what's so great about, my closest peers, you're not going to have HR at every Ronald McDonald House. There's more that have come along the way, especially since COVID, which is fantastic. But we're leaning on each other. We get it. It's, what do you do for this? What do you do for that? Do you have a policy you could share? What goal do you have around this information right here? So it's really a collaborative environment. And we had our 50th anniversary for the charity overall, not for the Cincinnati location. But we were celebrating this summer at our global conference in Chicago. And when you put thousands of people in one room that care about people so greatly, especially at a vulnerable moment in their life, that alone is super inspiring. It's a great organization.
What is the overarching mission for someone who may not know much about, again, exactly what's delivered from an experience to patients and families?
Yeah, so we take care of families while their child is being hospitalized or coming in for checkups. So families come from all over the world, especially here in Cincinnati, because we have the #1 pediatric hospital in the nation. But they're coming in for care. And while their child is being treated, we are just steps away from that. So families stay with us. What's really amazing is with our rooms, you've got rooms that have 2 beds in there. They have their own bathroom. They have, a TV in there to where they can come out of the room and come into a common space, or they can stay in their room. Every family's different. We do have an isolation area to where families that have children that are more vulnerable can be in a more isolated area to where masks are required on that side. You have maybe more immunosuppressed children. But we have family rooms, common areas. We have an active play space that welcomes the kids, and you hear the nature sounds, the lights adjust to the time of day or what the weather is doing outside.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Our culinary team, they provide meals for our families. So one of the things that we do for our families that are staying with us, they get meals twice a day. That's one less thing that they have to worry about. It does not matter if we don't ask any family to pay, so it's free to stay with us. It doesn't matter income level to be able to stay with us. This was a vision of Dr. Audrey Evans, and she wanted a place for parents to be able to rest and recharge, be together as a family unit so that their child can heal faster and better.
It's amazing.
Yeah.
And how many rough estimate of how many chapters are worldwide?
Over 270 chapters.
Wow. So there are all over the world.
All over the world. And it's going to be where there's going to be not necessarily a children's hospital, but there might be a hospital that has a children's floor. Gotcha. So when you're looking at, all over the world, there's chapters in Ukraine, there's chapters in South Africa, there's chapters in Japan. It's all over, and it's incredible.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Thank you for all that your whole team does, and the whole organization. Is there? How can someone get involved? What does involvement? What could it look like possibly?
Yeah. So involvement could be as simple as you're going through McDonald's and you're rounding up, because they're not always going to ask you, and that's okay. But you can round up. And that money does come back to the organization.
Wow, okay.
If you're wanting to get more involved, you want to come in and see the organization and be able to impact the families in person. We have volunteer opportunities. You had mentioned the snack time. Being able to sign up and provide a snack, a healthy snack for our families. It's very easy. There's information on there what you're signing up for. Maybe you're filling fruit cups. Maybe you're doing a different snack. We have everything ready so that all the individuals have to do is just show up, and they can put those together. Another meaningful opportunity is with our Taste of Hope. We are always looking for groups to be able to come in and make the meals for our families.
Yeah.
Bonus,
So
they're doing that with our chefs. So you're learning as you're preparing meals too. I know I've learned tricks. My team goes in and does this. Our leadership team goes in and does this. But you're learning how they'll have the menu already, and your station is set up, and you come in and you have a station, and you're learning how to prep and prepare that meal for the families. Our meals are always nutritious. We always have options for dietary restrictions, but it's a great way to team build. Whether it's a friend group, a family, or it's your corporate team, you can sign up to do this. So it's a great way to give back and spend time together as well.
Yeah.
We do have regular volunteer opportunities. We call them regular because they're in there on a more regular basis. So a minimum of 2 shifts a month, 2 4-hour shifts a month. They can come in and volunteer and give back their time in designated areas.
And are there resource needs that you all need most for families, or how could someone find out about the actual resource needs of what you all need to support the families you're...
So on our website, we have our wish list, and we keep that updated regularly. So whether that's things that we need for the families or that we need to take care of the families, it could be very basic things. It could be toys. You had mentioned our toy closet. That is a very special closet in the house. As you've seen, there's windows, there's glass, and we're always finding handprints on it because children are putting their face up to it, and they're thinking about, hey, what am I going to get next when I get to redeem my ticket? Yeah. So they'll get their ticket, and they can redeem that ticket, and depending on how long they stay, they may have multiple tickets.
Yeah.
So being able to choose a toy that maybe they have at the house, they may take that over to the hospital with them. Or a parent is thinking, hey, my kid just had a really hard day. I want to get them something from the toy closet. So it's something, being able to keep that stocked as well.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's so easy to participate and provide support that then provides hope and positive energy to these great children and families that you all are supporting.
Yeah.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Melissa, when it comes, one of the things that we talk a lot about in a variety of ways is the topic of conflict communication. Like, it feels like every team we interact with and every leader we're training up in the skills, people are looking like, how do I build more effective teams? How do I communicate more effectively? How do I navigate change and conflict and challenge? Are there any guiding points that you would provide that you have found helpful, or things that you're still trying to figure out yourself that might be able to relate to those that are joining us today?
You know, I had an executive coach several years ago that I was talking with him about when I'm having difficult conversations with, it doesn't even have to be an employee, with someone. I would notice how my body was reacting. You know, I'm uncomfortable. I'm feeling sweaty. I'm, trying to plan for what the other person is going to say so that I can react in hopefully a calm way. And I remember him saying to embrace the uncomfortable because it shows that you care. And that I bring myself back to, because no one normally likes difficult conversations.
Right.
But when we come at it with an empathetic approach, then we can at least be comfortable with how we have approached it, how we have set the table for the conversation, which I think is the number one critical thing. Don't catch people off guard. But also to not try to plan for what the other person is going to say or how they're going to react, because we can't control that. So those two things, I feel, have really allowed me to hit difficult conversations more head on.
Okay.
I am naturally a very direct person, and I know the basement of that could probably, that could be, you got to be careful how you deliver something.
Yeah.
And that's something that I'm very aware of, to make sure that I'm coming at it to where there's not confusion, but to where also I'm being compassionate with how I'm delivering the information as well.
Yeah.
So those things I think have been critical for me, because I think so often we're in difficult conversations. It doesn't have to be that, I'm firing somebody or I'm doing this, but sometimes the conversation's just difficult, and maybe I'm not prepared enough. Maybe I'm, but how am I showing up to the conversation? And if I set the table to where they're more at ease and I'm more at ease, to be able to have the conversation that we need to have.
That's great support. Yeah. Yeah. I think these lessons from a variety of voices can be so helpful for all of us to take in. So one of the things that we've committed to, and part of the reason why we love having conversations with leaders like yourself, is that everyone has different life experiences, different approaches, different coaching elements, different key learnings that they've had. And we get to share those with individuals who join us today, who are having the conversations with us, who are seeking, like, I'd like to hear 3 different perspectives. You could hear 7 different perspectives through the Unconventional Leadership Podcast and through TMI's platform. And that then helps you say, I am going to take that advice, and I'm going to take this advice, and I'm going to work on these 2 things possibly only this year. I want to work on getting more confident and okay and uncomfortable and silence this year, so that I don't show it on my face how freaked out I am to walk into this conversation. And, I'm just going to try to, let me listen to that person's perspective. Let me understand what's really going on. And, we've talked several times about the dynamic of maybe that really wasn't the intent of the message you heard. Maybe the way you were struck by what was delivered wasn't supposed to feel personal. It was just feedback. And it wasn't personally trying to take you down into the basement type of dynamic, but what was really meant there, and what can I learn from that? And, all of these types of learning lessons, which also helps with managing team effectiveness. So one of the highest rated data points in our platform that people ask for support on is managing team effectiveness. And I think it's interesting because the trend hasn't changed a whole lot. And what I am kind of like taken aback by is that people are willing to say that, because it also means I may not be as effective, possibly even as my boss thinks I am, right? Or wants me to be. But people are self-reflecting to say, I want to learn that. And then they circle that back with, I want to learn how to impact a positive work culture. Not what is culture, but like, how do I have a positive impact on work culture? How do I lean into uncomfortableness in the workplace to help my team be more effective in it? And then, if as you learn, as we all learn about that journey, we learn it from others who have gone before us, right? It's why masterminds and community groups and cohorts are so powerful, because we're learning together.
And that's such a good point to bring up, because I know as I was going through my leader journey and starting out as a leader, you're really hard on yourself because you think you have to have all this figured out and that there is a certain way to be a leader.
Yeah.
And I don't know about anybody else, but as you take the VIA character strengths or, other strength assessments, or you get evaluated, you're like, oh, I have this, but I want that. Why do I have to be more like this? I want to be more assertive. I want to be able to know all the numbers and be detailed. And, at some point you just have to sit back and embrace who you are, and that your style is going to be different than somebody else's. So when you can pick tidbits, that to me is empowering, because you think, okay, I really don't have to have all the answers. And this is how I show up for my team and my organization and my peers also. So it's freeing to hear. That gets me excited hearing you say that, because I hope more people feel that way. Because I still have times where I think, but I'm not like that. I should be more like that. And there's things that I think that we can bring in to better ourselves, but I'm not going to change at the core who I am. That's impossible.
Yeah. How has knowledge of self been helpful for you, and what could we learn from that? So you mentioned assessment tools, right? There's many assessment tools.
Yeah.
I promise you, I get asked every week of an assessment that I've certainly heard of, and others I'm like, I've never heard of that before. And there's so many tools, so many resources. How have you leaned into knowledge of self, and how has that impacted your career in a positive way?
When I first started working with an executive coach, when I first really started going into a leadership role, really being able to evaluate, there's the DISC assessment, there's the strength finders, there's the VIA character strengths. Getting an idea and seeing it on paper of who I am, what the words mean of maybe who I am, how I come across, what people see in me, the value. That's helpful, because as you're going through and trying to identify who you want to be as a leader, it helps bring you back to, but these are at my core, who I am. Yeah. How do I build upon this? Yeah. I think we can go down the whole of assessing ourselves or our teams to death, to where we might miss something. But we have used the VIA character strengths or the strengths assessment tests to be able to identify where are the strengths on the team and where are our gaps, because we don't want to be so heavy in one area to where we're missing a whole other piece. For me, it can be hard to hear the things that maybe you need to work on. So when I think about other assessments we do, I have my team. My boss started this, our CEO, of Start, Stop, Continue. So I send it to my team to say, hey, what do you want me to stop doing? What do you want me to start doing? What do you want me to continue doing? How am I showing up for them? But it was interesting doing the VIA character strengths with your team. I hadn't done that one before. And that one was very eye-opening for me. And that was just this past year. When we talk about the top 5 that show up in your inventory, the top 2 for me were honesty and integrity. And it was eye-opening why I react the way that I do to things that are not right or unjust, or if I feel somebody's being dishonest, or if I don't feel I'm showing up completely honest and vulnerable and direct with somebody. So I think that it's very important to do them and to find out what works best for you and for your team. But when I'm looking at myself, it's very eye-opening, and it allows me to continue to build on the things that are working well or that are at my core.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah, there's a level of openness to what is. Like, for example, my high school junior just recently took his Myers-Briggs.
Interesting.
And he's my oldest. And he came out to an ENTJ, which is classically exactly what mine is. And I can feel all of the energy of his ENTJ. And I'm sure 25, 35 years ago, people could feel all of my energy of my ENTJ. And then I've learned, good, bad, or indifferent, how to manage how that shows up and in what environments. And then, classically, like, how do other people show up and what can they bring and where do I need to sit quiet and listen, and at what time do I need to speak and share thoughts and vision and perspective, and but these assessment tools are so helpful. Our feedback is always using them to develop yourselves and others, right? Using resources to gain knowledge and perspective is so helpful, incredibly helpful. And start somewhere. The other thing that we get asked often is, hey, could you have this person take an assessment, or could you have this group take an assessment that would solve for this, and this? And we're like, have you ever used this assessment before? And an organization will say, no, but we hear it's a really good one. Someone told me I should use it because of something I'm dealing with. That's not necessarily a way to bring a new assessment to the table. Like, using it in a team building and a knowledge share and a culture giving type of environment, so helpful. And a proactive coaching, self-awareness, and then we're going to play this out. We want it to continue to show up. We don't want it to be a flash in the pan. We did that one thing again. So for those who may have been in an environment where, like, oh yeah, we were assessment flavor of the month, or if you find yourself listening to this and watching and you're like, yeah, I've probably done that. I've probably taken all the assessments and I've exhausted people. It's great to take something like VIA and build upon it for a couple of years or a few years. Just keep building upon it and bring those skills and conversations. And that's what we did. We did with Myers-Briggs early. When I say early, the relativity of that is probably, 5 to 10 years into my career, and we really invested in it. What does that look like? And then we brought in a tool called HBDI, the Herman Brain Dominance Model. And then we really started studying that, and we started studying teams that were using it, and started noticing some of our clients are using it, and like really work it, right? We built a sales philosophy based on HBDI, and a business development strategy around HBDI models, but using them in the everyday is so helpful.
Yes.
So I'm
it
glad
helps
you
teams
shared.
work more effectively together.
That's right. So managing team effectiveness.
Yes.
So I want to thank you for the time today, and I want to thank you for joining us on this week's episode of the Unconventional Leadership Podcast. Great shout out to all of the awesomeness that happens at Ronald McDonald House. Melissa, you and your team. Also, we want to thank the Cincinnati Podcast Studio for bringing this to life and helping in our effort of unlocking human potential.